Hello. 2023 was a great year for VR. The 4090 had just been released the fall before. I got my Varjo Aero about this time last year. And then around November, my big screen Beyond came around. The 4090 drives them both beautifully. We've got a great match. Technologies are in alignment. I mean, close. When I first got the Aero, it really was having a hard time in DCS. And then a guy named Matthew, or Mbuchia, if you see him, his GitHub, came out with quad view dynamic foveated rendering. Now, the support for it was in there. He put in the hook to OpenXR so that we could use it in applications that had support for it, like DCS did. Fantastic. 90 frames per second, sharp, all is great with the world, right? And at the resolution this has, about 8 megapixels, the 4090 could handle it in other applications. iRacing, yes, we have DFR, but maybe it's good for 5 or 10%. Not really helping like the 70 to 90 that the quad view is giving us, which is a massive improvement. Some like Assetto Corsa competition, maybe they got 20, 25% improvement with DFR. They're less efficient, so forth. But the fact remains that DFR is an important keystone to a lot of these things working well if you are, at a certain resolution or higher. Once again, with it Beyond, I'm able to get where I need to pretty well. I'm running DCS at 75 frames per second. I'm running iRacing at 90 frames per second. 4090 drives it beautifully. I'm in good shape. Of course, that is the top-of-the-line GPU available today. So let's start looking at 2024. Here's where some things are going well, some things are a little off the rails. Let's just put it in that kind of a context. So January, Varjo releases the XR4, right? 51 PPD, 55 in their native mode, right? 3,880 pixels across by 3,740 vertical, right? So 14.2 megapixels per eye. 51 PPD cam, or a headset. It's amazing, right? In DCS, with quad view DFR. In every other application, bring it back to 35 PPD. So, and I'm not saying they're getting the same performance I'm getting with the Aero, because I get a solid 90 frames per second. And it looked good at lower frame rates, but I don't think the XR4 with the exact same hardware I'm running is able to do that. And I've got a top-of-the-line GPU and CPU in my system. So, so if you were buying the XR4 for anything besides DCS, so you're not a Digital Combat Systems pilot, and you buy that 51 PPD headset, for 51 PPD, you just bought a $4,000 paperweight. Because we do not have DFR support across the board. But wait, you say, 3 days ago, OpenXR released 1.1, and they took the wonderful dynamic foveated rendering with the quad view and made it part of the OpenXR standard. It comes built in, the support for it. Yay. It's a standard. People could build against that, right? So what it means is you still have DCS support. Oh, and Pavlov. Everything else, not so much. And recently in an iRacing forum, there was a discussion about DFR and getting quad view support for iRacing, right? Now that it's part of the OpenXR standard, and it kind of fell on deaf ears. Now, iRacing has a large group of users, subscribers who are racing on it. They've got a decent budget. They've got long-term software development happening all the time. And they kind of went, eh. And in response to that, Matthew, the person who put all this out here on GitHub, and once again, thank you so much for all your work. You are a godsend, said that he didn't think we'd really see this except in brand new applications being built from scratch going forward. So maybe in a year or two time we're going to see something. That's a little problem though, right? So if you've got a 51 ppd headset that you can only run at 35 ppd without quad view DFR, and you're running a 4090, and the 5090 is coming, maybe end of this year or early 2024, or 25, I mean, maybe we'll see a 40% jump. That's still not the 70 to 90, which means after the 5090 gets here, they'll get better frame rates in DCS, and all other applications, they'll be at 35 ppd. So if you're not a DCS pilot, it's still a $4,000 paperweight. Well, let's switch gears. So that first one, we're just not ready for it yet. We do not have the support to drive it, and we don't have the hardware to drive it, except in one application. So, and to be clear, the XR4 is primarily for combat or flight simulations. The pass-through cameras on it are so that pilots in 100% mock-ups of cockpits can see their hands operating the myriad of controls, and then the window is notched out to be VR. Fantastic setup, expensive application for military use and so forth. So it has a real use. Not so big for gamers unless you're into DCS. Okay. The next big headset coming out this year is the Somnium VR1. It's coming out pretty soon. I think they hit the Goldilocks area, right? So the 4090 can drive this, it can drive the Crystal, it can drive the Beyond. It's all good. The VR1 has about another 20-25 degrees field of view compared to, say, a Crystal. So there's additional polygons once you get wider. This is where DFR matters a lot more. So if you think in terms of, here's a circle you see with your eyes as you're looking around, right? And you've got this much field of view. So you're seeing this percentage, and it's only rendering this piece of this. Now let's say you're out here. Now DFR matters a lot more because you're actually able to see a smaller percentage of the overall area, and if you're rendering the whole thing, it's a much larger load on your GPU. So wider field of view can bite you. So now the good news is, from all indications, the VR1 is going to be, the Aero was good. The Crystal introduced local dimming, so it had more contrast, and it was sharper, and it had a better vertical field of view. And it looks like the VR1 is going to, once again, be a jump from the Crystal, probably a bigger jump. It's going to have a much wider field of view, whereas, they're pretty similar except vertically. And it's brighter, better color, and sharper. Win, win, win. It is going to be more of a GPU load. So with a 4090, you can make it work well in a number of applications. And I think with a 5090, you'll be able to unleash its full potential. So I think the VR1 is Goldilocks. It is the place to be right now, especially if you're considering getting a 5090 in the future. I think a 4090 will drive it okay. 5090, it'll come into its own. Fantastic piece of hardware, it looks like. Still isn't here yet, but indications are very high. I'm very optimistic about it. All right, so now let's get to the Pimax announcements. So first off the bat, they're doing one thing very, very good. They've got the Crystal Light coming out. It's at a good price point. They've stripped it down so that it's tethered, but it doesn't have internal processing or battery. They also removed local dimming, and they removed eye tracking. But the key area is it's below $1,000. It has inside-out tracking, so you can buy it and use it by itself. So it is in very rare company right now, being at that end of the spectrum. So Pimax is doing VR a service by creating a tethered headset in that price range, natively tethered. The Meta Quest 3 is still a fantastic bargain for the price. It doesn't have quite the same tethered capabilities, but still. And you know, the crystal light will probably have a better look than it does. Now, for the extra 200, it's still under 1,000, and you can get the local dimming, so you get a little more contrast. Might be worth it for some people. So that announcement, nuts on, perfect. Pimax said they're also moving away from the onboard processing in batteries. I won't. Okay, I'll say I told you so. Early on, I made comments in a number of early reviews saying the sim market doesn't want it, doesn't need it. People are sitting in rigs using a headset like this. They're not running around playing Beat Saber in a crystal. They're in a sim rig. Anyway, so they're changing directions. That's really good. Glad to see it. Then they introduced the supers. Now, this is where things start to get a little interesting, because they made a number of claims, some that made sense and some that are pure marketing, and some that might have some truth, but it really depends. So let's start with the first thing. They spent some time talking about glass versus plastic. Now, let's compare the crystal and the VR1. So indications right now are that with the plastic lenses, now there are two plastic lenses in the VR1. It's brighter, has better color, it's sharper, and has a much wider field of view than the crystal. So far, I'm not seeing the huge advantage to glass. I'm not saying glass can't have an advantage over plastic. All of my Nikon lenses are glass. Zeiss and Voigtlander, lead glass. There are optical reasons that glass can be better, especially if you've got 7, 8, 9, 12 elements in a large stack of glass. But if you look at the Apple Vision Pro, $3,000, plastic lenses, Meta Quest 3, plastic lenses, the Beyond, plastic lenses, the Sony VR1, plastic lenses. So they're making claims about glass lenses because they're the only ones in town using glass lenses. And I'm going to say technically glass could be better than plastic, but if you design plastic right, it's not currently an issue. So as an example, when Pimax announced the crystal, they said it'd have a 125-degree field of view. It ended up with like 102 to 104. And they said optionally with wider lens it'd be 140. And their optional lens ended up being about 115 with bad binocular view and not very good quality for the image. So they didn't prove that they could create a wide field of view using glass. So now they're announcing a 130-degree field of view on their upcoming supers. And just keep that in context. They said 125 with the crystal and 140 with the wide lenses, and they ended up being 102, 104, and 115. So they're saying 130. So maybe historically, I'd take it with a little salt. Glass versus plastic, great marketing hook. Not sure how much it really matters in the grand scheme. The end result are what matters. So if you engineer your plastic well enough that it outperforms the glass, it's good. Anyway, nothing to say about that. Now let's get back. So the QLED is coming out, and they said it'll have 50 ppd. And they're going to put in 15 megapixel. Now the XR4 that's already struggling right now with 14.2 and 115-degree field of view really can't run more than one application at that top resolution. So the supers are going to come out, and the 5090 with quad view will do a beautiful job in one application. What happens after that? What if you're not a DCS pilot? I guess you'll run it at a lower resolution. And this gets to the whole idea that 2024 is the year of the bottlenecked headset. The XR4 is bottlenecked. DFR could fix that, or a 6090 could fix that. The same thing is going to be the case with these new supers. You'll be able to run them at the same PPD that you're getting now with a Crystal or an Aero or even Beyond or whatever. But you're not going to be able to run them flat out without something like quad view, DFR, something at that range. So they're going to hit the chute needing a 5090 to be able to run anything, and they won't be able to run flat out at their top resolution for just about anything. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like a good fit. That's buying ahead of the curve, and I realize that's not uncommon. When people bought the 8KX, they couldn't run it at 180. They had to bring it down to, a much lower field of view so they could actually get a decent frame rate. And then by the time the 4090 came out, you could actually take your 8KX, which was many years ago, and you could actually run it full screen. And maybe that's what they're doing here. I just have trouble with the value proposition of buying a piece of hardware, waiting 2 years for a card to drive it, when the technology is going to continue to improve. So in that vein, let's look at their next piece of that. They had another super coming. It's a micro OLED. And the marketing guys are checking all their boxes. It's like, okay, we're going to have the high PPD of the XR4. We're going to have the wide field of view of the VR1. And we're going to have micro OLEDs like the Beyond and the Vision Pro. At some point in the future, someday, right? So we've seen how long the 12X or the 12K has come to get here. Maybe we'll have an announcement next year. We'll see. But let's see when the micro OLEDs are even possible. I mean, right now they're not. Not if you want any kind of field of view. So if you take your Apple Vision Pro, they're using the largest micro OLED display that's in production today, and they're pushing real hard to get volumes, and it's very expensive, $700, just for the lens, and display and lens, and the Beyond is using micro OLEDs, but they're using a smaller one, and they designed the entire headset around a micro OLED that was actually producible in volume, and they made a lot of compromises to get there. I love this headset. And getting back to my whole thing where DFR really is only valuable for one application, other DFR, unless you care about eyeballs moving in VR chat for dynamic foveated rendering, unless you're a DCS pilot, it's marginal how much it helps. So when Pimax says, you can use fixed foveated rendering for the crystal light, that's true. I'll give it to them. That's perfectly adequate right now because DFR is not mature. It has very poor support, which is why I love this little guy. It doesn't have it, very comfortable, love this thing to death. All right, so getting back to the micro OLEDs. So they're announcing micro OLEDs, and they didn't specify the actual field of view of the micro OLEDs, which is a good thing because it won't be as large as the QLEDs because the size of the displays are much smaller. Or if they tried to get to the same field of view with a smaller display, they'd have to use a lot more magnification, in which case there would be more degradation. The optics would be more difficult. You're trying to really force light into a different path. So I don't know what to think about it other than they checked a box off. They said, Apple and Big Screen have micro OLEDs. We're going to have one too. And we're going to hopefully get you to wait to buy our product when it gets here, whatever it might be when it gets here. So, like I said, I saw their announcement. It was a professional-looking announcement. I didn't roll my eyes. The crystal light's going to be a big thing. The rest of the announcement I take with a serious grain of salt. So in a nutshell, 2024, we are bottlenecked by DFR. And despite OpenXR coming out with a standard, it's going to be years before we see anything come out of that. And for a lot of these new headsets, it's going to be another 2.5 years before you can drive them in most applications at a decent frame rate if you want to actually use the full resolution the headset has. So that's the reality we're living in. I'm going to be sticking it out with my 4090 and my Beyond and watching from the sidelines for the next couple of years. When the 6090 comes out, I will look and see what's out then, and then I'll consider buying again. Now, if I hadn't gotten spoiled by the lightweight and form factor of this thing, and I was still using a Varjo Aero, I'd be all over the Somnium VR1. It looks like it's going to be a good headset. It looks like it's going to be built solidly. I think they're going to do a good job, but it's not here yet, so that all remains to be seen. Sorry, I wish I had better news. I really would like to see stuff happening. Every time I see something I'm excited about, it's like, oh, but, you know, it's like OpenXR, we've made it a standard. Yeah, but nobody's going to do anything about it until they're working on new software. Okay. And then the question is, who will actually do it? I hope people start jumping in. I'd love to see iRacing have quad support. Even if I'm not using it with this, it needs to happen for the headsets that are coming, because when you double the resolution and then start increasing the field of view, you've got not only more polygons, but more resolution. So you get twice as much resolution and a lot more polygons. And the GPUs we have are not doubling every 2 years. They're going up by, 40% or so. Maybe we'll get 60 in the 5090. That'd be great. But we'll still be waiting for the 6090 to run any of these things at full resolution in the sim titles we care about. Anyway, so fingers crossed things work out better. I keep waiting for a dynamic foveated rendering miracle to appear. I don't see it happening soon. It's still going to be an uphill battle. I don't know when it's going to happen. And you can wish for all the field of view and all the resolution that you want, and then be stuck with a hard reality that you can't use it. There's just not enough hardware out there to drive a really high resolution, wide field of view headset right now. So, good luck. Enjoy what you've got. It's going to be a long haul. That's all.